Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a literal mountain of recent reporting, historical surveys, and polling data to unpack what observers are calling the unprecedented turbulence of Donald Trump's second term. We're pulling from a huge array of sources, from investigative journalism at Jacobin and analytical deep dives in the iPaper to public forum discussions and data-driven political tracking. Our goal here is to take all of these different perspectives, pull out the hard facts, and map out exactly what analysts are calling a historical deluge of information.
All right, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The numbers, 2. The wall of scandal, 3. Financial controversies, 4. Institutions and norms, 5. Policy chaos, and finally 6. The midterm test. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. The numbers. When trying to make sense of any presidency, you kind of have to start with the hard data. And right now, recent polls are showing that 40% of Americans actually consider Trump the worst president in U.S. history. At the exact same time, according to reporting by First Post, his overall approval rating has slipped below that same 40% mark, with only 12% of respondents calling him the best president. That is a massive data point, especially when you remember we're dealing with a president who just achieved a historic political comeback.
And you know what's really fascinating? It's how closely that public feeling aligns with expert historical consensus. In the 2024 Presidential Greatness Project Expert Survey, over 150 historians and political scientists gave him a score of 10.92 out of 100. That score ranks him dead last, at 45th out of all U.S. presidents. And journalists are quick to point out that this ranking comes from experts across the entire political spectrum, so it reflects an assessment of his actions rather than just partisan leanings.
To put those incredibly low scores into perspective, critics draw a pretty stark contrast. Historians generally prize concrete legislation and stability, right? So they weigh Biden's legacy, things like the CHIPS Act, major infrastructure investments, and historic low unemployment against the defining moments of Trump's tenure. Critics summarize those moments as ballooning deficits, the disruption of the democratic process, and of course, the events of January 6th.
Section 2. The wall of scandal. So how is the administration actually managing this environment? Well, one unnamed administration official described the hyperactive atmosphere as a, quote, 24/7 food fight. The reporting paints a picture of an administration where there's literally no time to grow into the office because the environment just lurches from crisis to crisis. Decisions are made and unmade at a dizzying pace, completely driven by instinct rather than standard bureaucratic process.
And that brings us to a concept deeply analyzed by Jacobin magazine, the wall of scandal. The core idea here is about understanding the psychological effect this has on the public. An oversaturation of nonstop news, scandals, and unprecedented events might actually numb voters to things that would have ended literally any other presidency. Think about your own newsfeed. When every single day brings a historic controversy, doesn't it eventually just become background noise? When that happens, observers argue it becomes impossible for the average citizen to keep track, which essentially creates a reliable floor of support that never seems to budge.
Section 3. Financial controversies.
Now let's look at the ethical claims that reporters say make up a massive load-bearing pillar of this wall. We're talking about $3.4 billion. According to investigative reports, that is the staggering amount Trump has allegedly enriched himself in just the first 7 months of his second term. To put that into perspective, reporters note that the controversy surrounding the Biden family involved alleged payments of around $1 million. Here, journalists are tracking wealth accumulation in the billions, directly tied to his time in the Oval Office.
The sheer velocity of these alleged deals is frankly immense. Investigative reporters have tracked a wild array of activities. We're seeing claims of his company selling 500 shoddy smartphones to supporters on false pretenses, a $2 billion crypto business infused with foreign cash. There are reports of his family hitching rides on presidential delegations to China, securing federal loans for family-invested rare earth mining firms, and even raising $148 million through dinners and meme coins. Sources argue this makes previous presidential scandals look like small potatoes.
To put this whole thing into historical perspective, reporters love to point to Honest Abe. Lincoln famously returned $199.25 of a $200 campaign budget because he absolutely refused to cheat the public. Contrast that exacting financial morality with today, where the current administration faces a civil fraud judgment approaching $500 million and seemingly uses the office as a massive revenue generator.
Section 4. Institutions and norms.
This is the area where historians are expressing their deepest concerns regarding the rule of law. Journalists report that the Department of Justice is actively scrubbing details of the January 6th crimes from its website, while the administration blocks the full release of the Jeffrey Epstein files in what critics are calling an obvious cover-up. Add to this an unprecedented $1.8 billion legal settlement granting his inner circle immunity from IRS audits. And we're seeing reports of Kash Patel's FBI allegedly being used to intimidate election officials in swing states and actively prosecute political critics.
Naturally, historians make the comparison to Richard Nixon, but they point out a really distinct difference. While Nixon was quietly devious and plotted in the shadows, Trump's approach is uniquely noisy and unfiltered. Whether it's pursuing critics or targeting political opponents, the alleged abuse of powers is being done entirely out in the open.
Section 5. Policy chaos. Beyond the money and the institutions, the actual daily mechanisms of governing are reportedly just in overdrive. Domestically, the Department of Homeland Security is reportedly buying up hundreds of iris scanners and threatening to cancel international flights into left-leaning cities. Internationally, the reporting paints a picture of a globally unsettling foreign policy. There's an escalating, deadly conflict with Iran that observers say the administration lacks any clear strategy for, alongside reports of the president actually weighing a military invasion of Cuba.
Observers point to incredibly impulsive public statements to highlight this instinct-driven approach. Take a recent social media post regarding the Middle East where he demanded, quote, "Open the effing strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell, just watch." When past presidents spoke softly and carried a big stick, this administration often screams loudly on social media. Critics argue this creates an unpredictable foreign policy that really damages global stability.
Section 6. The midterm test.
We've looked at the history and the policies, but what does this mean right now as we head toward the November elections? As political analysts point out, these approval numbers dictate momentum and power in Washington. The White House is reportedly scrambling to steady the ship, scaling back certain controversial immigration operations and reviewing tariffs. Because if approval stays below 40%, historical trends suggest severe losses in Congress. That means tougher oversight, endless investigations, and a completely stalled legislative agenda.
So we have to end with a crucial question based on all this reporting. Is this chaotic deluge of information an intentional masterstroke, a deliberate strategy to exploit our media diet and avoid accountability? Or is it an inherently unsustainable path, destined to just crash head-on into the midterm ballot box? We'll leave you to chew on that. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.